How are you, CPAC? Do you guys support the Second Amendment to the Constitution in this room?
Yeah.
I thought you might. Well, we're going to tell some Second Amendment stories today on this panel. I'm very excited to host this. We've got a great lineup, as you can see. Antonia, Kyle, and Representative Hudson are going to join us.
Don't I get to be called Richard?
Richard.
Okay, thank you.
Antonia, I want to start with you. Tell the crowd here at CPAC a little bit how you came to be such a strong advocate for the Second Amendment.
Yeah, well, I think, I know it's going to surprise some people, but it actually started about 9 years ago when I was radically and graciously saved by the saving grace of Jesus Christ. It was then that I realized the importance of life, the preciousness of life, the right to life, how important that is to have the opportunity to even live, but then, of course, the right to defend that life as well. And after that, I actually went through an experience of, I'm a sexual assault survivor, and in college, in 2015, as a graduate student in Texas, we were talking about campus carry. And at the same time, a lot of the news media were talking about sexual assault on campus. And I felt at that time that if I could truly empower my peers and other women, then what greater way to do that than to empower them with a firearm? Because that's the greatest equalizer that we have on this earth.
That takes a lot of courage. You had an incident at Hampshire College, I believe, where the mere mention of the Constitution and the Second Amendment was enough to have the anti-Second Amendment forces come after you. Tell us a little bit about that experience, how it made you feel, and then how it was resolved.
Yeah, so I was part of a tour called Gun Rights Are Women's Rights, because they are. I started an organization called Empowered, which is a gun rights organization for young women on college campuses. And so, yeah, exactly. Give it up, ladies. And I was in Massachusetts, there's the conservative bastion of gun rights and everything. And during my tour, I was at Hampshire College, a small university that's known for being incredibly progressive. I was about to head out of my hotel room, literally about an hour before I was set to speak. And I get this phone call from the student that asked me to speak that night. And he tells me that the school cancels my speech. And at the time, I'm not gonna lie, at the time I was kind of nervous anyways, but so I was a little bit glad, not really. But I went there to, of course, speak about the Second Amendment and women's empowerment. It was very clear. He tells me that he gets an email from the administration saying that, quote, the Second Amendment is too controversial of an issue, and so therefore we are canceling your speech. 1 hour before I was set to speak, everyone was already set there. People had already come from out of town to come hear me speak. And unfortunately, this small gathering that was supposed to be pretty small at the time went from being small to the Associated Press finding out about it and then becoming international news the next day, where the Hampshire College president went and finally called me and apologized for canceling my speech an hour before. And of course, he was going to make it right, and he was going to have me come speak again. And here we are over a year and a half later, and I haven't heard from them. So that's Hampshire College for you guys people.
One of the interesting things I've noticed is that despite all of the media coverage that you generally see on the issue of Second Amendment, that there has been an uptick in interest from the millennial set in shooting sports. So there is involvement, and it is moving in a direction where the younger generation are becoming more comfortable with firearms. Why do you think that is, as a younger person?
Well, I think, and this is you're gonna probably get mad at me, but I think it's because feminism actually did their job. And the job was to empower women, right? To make sure that women were independent. And so therefore, these young women are coming up believing, okay, progressive movement. You say that I'm an independent woman and I should be able to take care of myself. Well, what if it comes down to the fact that I want to also take safety into my own hands? Is feminism okay then? And so that's when women are saying, well, I'm going to use a firearm to be able to actually take safety into my own hands. And that's what they're doing now. They're realizing that if the feminist movement, the women's movement, the female empowerment movement, whatever you want to call it, is really about empowering women, then why don't you allow women to be able to use a firearm however they want to and wherever they want to? And that's the definition of equality right there. That's what young women are embracing today, and I think that's part of the future of the movement.
Let me ask a quick follow-up. I think conservatives generally know that with something like the Women's March, which seems to get a lot of media attention, what doesn't get a lot of media attention about the Women's March is that they seemingly don't allow conservative women to be a part of it. Second Amendment supporters who are women, pro-life advocates who are women. Can you speak to that for a moment? Why don't you think they want people with a diversity of ideas to come and be a part of that movement?
Because they're scared. Because I went to the Women's March a couple years ago. I was there when they had the first one just a few years ago when Trump was elected. And I knew very quickly, I had a small piece of hope that maybe this, iteration of the women's movement was going to be inclusive, like truly inclusive, and that meant conservative voices, that meant pro-life voices, that meant pro-gun voices. And unfortunately, I went there in DC and I realized the same thing that I had seen for so long and other young women had seen for so long, that it is not a movement that is for every woman. It's a movement for the radical progressive left. And that's it. And if you have any inkling of being pro-life or being pro-gun, because heaven forbid you would actually want young women to actually have an opportunity to have life, I think that's empowerment right there, to have an opportunity to have life. But then also to defend that life as a woman, what is more empowering than that? Nothing. And yet, so that is why the Women's March movement is not a movement for women. It's a movement to progress a very progressive agenda and rather regressive agenda.
I want to stay on the women's topic one time because I think this is fascinating, how the business world recognizes that there are a lot of Americans who support the Second Amendment and view them as perhaps as a potential audience. You've been involved in creating yoga pants with a concealed carry angle in those yoga pants.
So what you're referring to is Amy Robbins, the great creator of Alexo Athletica. I'm sure you guys saw when Tommy Lahren was wearing them and it became this big thing. People were upset that they would make yoga pants that you can put firearms in. That's ridiculous. But yes, Amy Robbins is the creator of that, and I'm a good friend of hers. I've known her for years, even before I was a pro-gun Republican, and she's done amazing things with that. And so, yeah, I'm a big supporter of her and Alexo Athletica. So you guys look out for that. It's great stuff.
That's pretty cool. Let me shift over to Kyle Kashuv here. Kyle was a student in Parkland, Florida, is a gun rights activist. Let me begin by having you tell the CPAC crowd here, what are you doing now?
So I'll preface that beginning. What happened at my school wasn't a gun issue. What happened at my school was that there were 46 reports to the BSO, the Broward Sheriff's Office. There were 2 tips to the FBI. The school knew that this kid was going to do this, and everyone dropped the ball. And instead of focusing on the gun and trying to ban them, I'm actually going and targeting those people who need to be held accountable. Just yesterday, I confronted the school resource officer who stood outside and cowered behind a wall when he knew that there were shootings going on in the building. He let 14 students die, and 3 people who were unarmed went inside the building and gave their lives. So it's holding these individuals accountable who failed us. That's what I'm doing.
Wow. I like that, man. Well, let me ask you to do a little bit of a deeper dive on what you think led to that tragedy that day.
As I said before, what led to this was that every single level of government knew that this was going to happen, and they did absolutely nothing. So instead of taking action and villainizing the gun, I'm going and we are targeting those individuals who allow this to occur. So my peers on the left will go out and rally against a gun that's just simply an inanimate object. That's all it is. It's simply an inanimate object. Without the individual pulling the trigger, I can't do any danger. But what I'm doing right now is I'm working with Mr. Pollock and Mr. Petty. Mr. Pollock lost his daughter, Meadow. Mr. Petty lost his daughter, Elena. And doing everything I can to ensure that not a single one of you have to go through the trauma that they had to go through. Because what happened at my school, I mean, that could have been your brother, your sister, your husband, your son. And it affects all of us. And I never thought it would happen to my school, and that's what I'm doing. We're fighting every single day through grief to ensure that no single family has to go through, no community has to go through what we went through.
If you're not doing what you're doing and bringing that perspective, and we're not in this room listening to it and understanding and cutting through so much of the noise that exists, what's the future hold for your generation? What happens if we lose this fight?
If we don't go out and fight for the Second Amendment, then quite frankly, it's not looking good. From the bills that are passed, that are right now was passed in the House Universal Background Check, it's not looking good. We have to go out and fight because all the statistics back us. But if the left can go time and time again and push their unconstitutional, policies, if we don't have, Trump did phenomenally by appointing those 2 justices, phenomenal. We need to uphold the Constitution, and we need to ensure that none of these gun control bills get passed.
I think that's a nice transition to you, Congressman. Nancy Pelosi said the other day that when there's a Democrat president, that Democrat president will declare a national emergency to put into effect disarmament, essentially, for the American people. One, let's remember that we're talking about the Constitution, and should you wish to alter the Constitution, it's in the Constitution, how you go about doing that. But tell us a little bit about, first, the Reciprocity bill, when Republicans kept the majority. What was about that bill? You were a major force in making sure that got passed. It, of course, did not pass the Senate. But there were, when we had that majority, we were able to make some progress on the issue. Why was that such an important cause for you to focus on?
Well, I introduced H.R. 38 last Congress because I'd heard from so many individuals about the hodgepodge of laws that different states have and the way it puts law-abiding citizens in a bind when you travel. You either become a criminal when you cross that imaginary state line, or you choose to not defend yourself and your family. I had an experience myself where I was in D.C. for the week and wanted to take my family to West Virginia camping that weekend. Fast forward to Saturday night, I'm laying in bed looking at the ceiling thinking, I don't have my gun. I'm out here in the middle of the woods. I'm not protected. And that feeling I felt. But hearing from folks and then hearing a story of Shanine Allen, single mother, African-American in South Philly who had been robbed twice. She decided to take matters in her own hands. She went out and legally purchased a firearm, went to firearm training, got a concealed carry permit. Later, she was driving, and she lived close to the state line in New Jersey. She drove into New Jersey, routine traffic stop. She did what she'd been trained. When the cop came to the window, she handed him her license and her concealed carry permit, said, "I'm a concealed carry permit holder, and I have a pistol in my purse." They arrested her, and she was looking at years in prison because she'd crossed that imaginary line. And so H.R. 38, the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act, says that just like a driver's license, when I leave my home in North Carolina to come up here to D.C., I don't have to stop at the Virginia line and take a new driver's test. They look at my North Carolina license and say, yes, that's a valid license.
We got anybody out there from North Carolina today who made the trip?
There we go.
There you go. What school are you from? There you go, UNC
49ers in
Charlotte.
the house. All right.
Norm the Niners in the house, ladies and gentlemen. The Democrats, of course, retook control of the body that you sit in. I've been reading a lot about H.R. 8, which seems to want to create a new body for background checks. It doesn't correct the existing NICS system or the state mechanisms that are already in place. I'll ask a follow-up question, but what are your thoughts on that bill?
Well, the Democrats are perpetrating a fraud on the American people. They are offering legislation that would absolutely do nothing to stop school shootings, mass shootings. They rolled this thing out with a lot of fanfare on the anniversary of Gabrielle Giffords' horrific attack. They had Representative Giffords there at the press conference with Speaker Pelosi. They roll out this legislation that would not have prevented the shooting of Gabrielle Giffords. It would not have prevented the shooting at Kyle's High School. It would not have prevented Columbine. It would not have prevented Newtown. It would not have prevented, I can go on and on. It wouldn't have prevented a single one of these shootings. Yet they prey upon the emotions of the American people, and they frame this argument to where they say, if you disagree with this legislation, if you dare point out the flaws of this bill, then you don't care about dead children. And it's a false paradigm that they're setting up, because we as conservatives love our children just as much as liberals love their children. And we want to stop violence just as much as liberals want to stop violence. But what we say is, don't judge us by our intentions, judge us by the actual laws we're promoting. And let's do something to actually tackle school violence. The other thing they say is, you Republicans don't do anything. Well, we actually, 2 Congresses ago, passed the most sweeping mental health reform in a generation. And in that specifically looked at, how can we address children who are having mental health crisis before they reach a breaking point, like Kyle's situation. Let's intervene with these individuals before they reach this point. Let's look at it from a mental health standpoint. Let's also look at what we can do to harden schools. We passed the Stop Violence Act last Congress that gave resources to schools, to harden the schools, to do metal detectors, to do whatever.
$2 billion, $2 billion.
And we should do more. And we should do more of that. But Republicans are we actually have alternatives that would stop violence that we are pushing and will continue to push. And I will work with any Democrat, I'll work with anybody to solve this problem. And that's what the American people expect us to do.
Well, there is a lot of intensity from liberal activist groups that your colleagues on the Democrat side have to meet with and have to listen to. Oftentimes their rhetoric is about wanting to keep the kids safe, just as you said. But when you get down into the nitty-gritty of it, it goes after the rights of law-abiding citizens and not the people that are perpetrating these terrible acts. And to a great deal, I mean, you have to hand it to them, it works. Oftentimes you can see in the polling data a quick spike in support for gun control or disarmament of law-abiding citizens, and that comes back down when people start thinking with their heads again. What is it in your mind that the people who are such strong proponents of repealing, in some cases, the Second Amendment, what is it that they really want?
Well, they hate guns, and they don't want anyone to have guns. But these folks don't understand this country, and they don't understand how important that Second Amendment is to guaranteeing all our other rights. And, you listen to the debate of H.R. 8. I mean, the way they're successful, H.R. 8 sounds great if you don't know better. Universal background checks, yeah. That's a great idea. We don't want people that shouldn't have guns to get their hands on guns. But then you look at the details of it. Every commercial gun sale in America already has a background check. Yep. The only gun sales that don't have background checks are if I want to sell one to my neighbor. And by the way, these mass shootings weren't done by someone who bought a gun from their neighbor. In fact, most of them were done by someone who passed a background check or had a straw man purchase, which is already illegal, or stole a gun from someone. And so their bill would do nothing to address that issue, but what it does is it infringes the right of law-abiding citizens. In the first instance on H.R. 8, it says that if I go dove hunting with my buddy and I let him borrow my shotgun, I can now go to jail for a year and have a $100,000 fine. Mm-hmm. Or how about if my neighbor has a restraining order against her boyfriend because he's beaten her? I can't loan her my shotgun tonight because she's worried he might come back, because I'll face a year in jail and a $100,000 fine under H.R. 8. It hurts the most vulnerable among us when you implement these liberal policies.
We often talk about measures that are designed to having a chilling effect on your First Amendment rights, but what you're describing is really designed to having a chilling effect on your Second Amendment rights as well. That's terrible. Kyle, let me ask you, what could the leaders in where you're from could have done better in order to protect those kids?
Before we get to that, I just want to say,
Certainly.
there's not enough thanks for what they did with the Stop School Violence Act. I want $2 billion for school safety, hardening our schools. They managed to get it passed in under 2 months, and that is phenomenal. Back to your answer.
Thanks.
What we can actually do in our schools, and what every single one of you can do when you go home is this, is hold our government officials accountable. If there's a government official who is not doing their job, who acted improperly, who is incompetent, vote them out. Do not allow bureaucrats. The government works for you. You don't work for the government. The government works for you. And we have to get back to that narrative. It's time and time again, the government has failed us. And that's why I'm pro 2A. I never shot a gun before this. I've only shot a gun once in my life. But the reason why I'm pro 2A is because every level of government failed me and my peers, and I will no longer leave my protection to the government.
I think that is the embodiment of the rugged self-sufficiency that America was founded on.
Sir.
And of course, Antonio, you're from Texas.
Yep.
We all know about Texas. Where do you live now?
Oh, where do I live now? I live in the other big D, Denver, from Dallas to Denver, so that's where I am now. But yeah, still pro-gun state for on the books at least right now. But we have some work to do.
There are statistics that came out talking about crime in most of America, violent crime using a firearm in the Northeast region, in the South, and in the Midwest, having gone down between 2016 and 2017. But there was a slight uptick in the West. Speak to, for a moment, since you're out there, how the Second Amendment might affect those crime statistics. A lot of people, a lot of folks who are on the other side of this debate associate an uptick in crime with too many guns on the street. How do you feel about that?
Well, how I feel about that is just look at London. With the fact that London is a place that has the highest violent crime, but yet they don't have any firearms, right? In fact, so much so that the mayor wanted to ban knives because, again, they continue this insanity cycle thinking that it's the tool and it's not the person. It's almost like there's this thing that we have in America that we realize that it's not the firearm, it's the person behind the firearm. It's the person behind the firearm that can make a decision between saving your life or harming your life. And guess what? The majority of people in America are law-abiding citizens who are there to protect life. And that's why we should protect law-abiding citizens.
That's something everybody can get behind. Kyle.
Yeah, I just want to jump on that. Just the facts so you guys know. For the past 20 years, the gun ownership rate has gone up 56%, but the homicide rate has gone down 49%. So if more guns equal more crime, that wouldn't be the case. That's just a fact that you guys should know.
I love that young people are getting involved at such an early age. Congressman, you got involved in politics at a young age. Let me ask you a thing here, and it may come off peculiarly, but I know you've been around a long time and you're well equipped to do it. How much of the motivation from the left and their involvement and their intensity on this issue is just about winning re-election? Is just about going out there and trying to get people to vote the right way, the way they want them to on a certain day?
Well, I'm going to slightly dodge your question because I work in a body where you have 435 people elected from their districts. There's a lot of districts in this country that I could not get elected in. You got people like my good friend Joe Kennedy from Boston, Massachusetts, who disagrees with me on every single issue, but he represents his constituency. And what's great about the Congress is we all come together representing the viewpoints of this nation, and what we're supposed to do is find a way to work together and solve the problems that the American people want us to solve. That's the way the system ought to work. And so for that reason, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. When I'm having a debate with Jerry Nadler on this gun control issue, I have to believe that he actually does love this country and loves his constituency, and he's trying to do the right thing. He's dead wrong. He is dead wrong, and if we let him, he'll destroy this great country. But I have to not assign bad intentions to him so that I can find a way to work with him. And so I give the other side the benefit of the doubt. when it comes to this gun issue, they really do want to save lives. But on the other hand, if they really wanted to save this, they would sit down with me and others like me, and let's find a way to work together and solve it. And so there is an angle to this that's all about power, and it's all about winning. It's all about electing more Democrats so they can drive that radical left agenda. I don't know. It is a little bit of both, but I do think there is sincerity on both sides of the issue. And I think there are some issues where we can come together to make things safer, like the Stop School Violence Act. For example, a bill we passed today extends the waiting period when you go to buy a gun from 3 days to 20 days. Terrible idea. But
why is it a terrible idea?
Well, because why should we make Shanine Allen, who's fearing for the life of herself and her 2 boys, wait 20 days when she could legally go buy a gun and get a 3-day wait? And actually, with instant background check, we could know right away that she's not a criminal. But what they're trying to do is fix what happened in South Carolina with the Charleston church shooting. Dylan Roof was convicted or was arrested. He shouldn't have been able to buy the gun he bought. There was a failure in law enforcement following up correctly. They called the wrong county rather than checking a database they had available. And so a great fix that we could come together, Republicans and Democrats, and agree on is tell the FBI to check every database. You would have caught Dylan Roof the first day. Yeah. Those are the kinds of things we ought to be working on together. And so I hope that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, as dead wrong as they are, I hope they care enough about this issue that we can find some common ground to let's stop these school shootings and let's do as much as we can to prevent them without threatening the constitutional rights of law-abiding citizens.
Your district down there in North Carolina has some urban areas, some suburban areas, and some rural areas. Do you notice in your district any difference of opinion on these topics, or is everybody aligned pretty much the same?
You know, it's kind of like a family. We don't all agree on everything, but I think most people understand the value of the Second Amendment. I think there's a lot of gun owners in my district. You can always have people at different sides of things, but I think most people in the South in general either grew up around guns or around folks who had guns. I think that's changing our urban areas a little bit. I think it's what's so great about seeing these young people up here, these leaders for the next generation, is they too are recognizing the importance of the Second Amendment. I think when you get to your urban areas, though, I think there is some disconnect. You know, I was at one point during this debate yesterday, someone was standing up talking about a gun show. And the way they were describing the gun show was like the Wild West. Like, you know, everybody's selling guns out of their trunk and you got people hanging from the ceiling. And I said to the congressman next to me, I said, you know, I should invite them to an actual gun show and see what, the gun show, anybody been to a gun show? It's a great experience. I mean, you got law-abiding citizens, you got law enforcement everywhere. You got some undercover law enforcement prowling the parking lots. I mean, it's a safe place. And you've got a lot of great Americans there selling guns, and I get to touch different guns and look at, I like that gun. And, but gun shows are not the way that the left is describing them in our floor debates. So I think there is some disconnect when you come to your more urban areas. But for the most part, I think folks in North Carolina understand it.
Kyle, I'm going to let you have the last word. Talk to the young people out in America who may disagree with you and try to bring them over to your way of thinking in 20 seconds or less. Okay,
there are 350 million firearms in the U.S. 2/3 of those are suicides. When people like to talk about assault rifles, they only make up 3% of all murders. 68% of those are suicides. So really, if we ban assault rifles, we really be doing 1% of all the entire issue. More people are killed by hands than they are killed by assault rifles. So really, 97.3% of all 97.3% of all mass public shootings occur in gun-free zones. The best statistic I said before, in the last 20 years, gun ownership has gone up 56%, and the homicide rate has dropped 49%. So guns do not equal more crime.
Ladies and gentlemen, please a nice CPAC thank you for Kyle Kashuv, Antonia Okafor, and Congressman Richard Hudson. Thanks. Thank you.